Good afternoon. I want to welcome you to the Tilman J. Fertitta Family College of Medicine Grand Rounds for today. I have the privilege of introducing to you Dr. Marc Triola. Dr. Triola received his bachelor's degree from the Johns Hopkins University, go Blue Jays, and then his MD degree from NYU School of Medicine. He had his residency in internal medicine at NYU School of Medicine and was chief resident. Subsequently, he did a research fellowship in medical informatics at the Mount Sinai School of Medicine. So he's sort of stuck onto Manhattan. He joined NYU subsequently as chief of the section of medical informatics, and he's currently professor of medicine, associate dean for educational informatics, and the founding director of the Institute for Innovations in Medical Education. The Institute combines education strategies with new informatics solutions to connect patient care and education at NYU Langone in a research and innovation initiative that is translational, empowers transformation, and empowers transformational change and benefits patients. Dr. Triola's research focuses on the use of AI tools to efficiently personalize education and give new insights to programs and to coaches. His lab develops new learning technologies, AI-driven educational interventions, and defines educationally sensitive patient and system outcomes that can be used to assess training. Those of us who have played around a little bit with educational informatics are very jealous of his facility and his resources. Dr. Triola and the Institute have been funded by the National Institutes of Health, including the Integrated Advanced Information Management System Awards Program, the National Science Foundation, the Josiah Macy Jr. Foundation, the U.S. Department of Education, and the American Medical Association's Accelerating Change in Medical Education program. He has had numerous keynotes and talks nationally and internationally, including a TED Talk at TEDMed 2012. He has had many, many national and international committees and honors, including serving as chair of the steering committee at Ubiquitous, which is now part of AAMC, and he is currently a board member of the AAMC. Dr. Triola.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ma, and it is a pleasure. You and I have known each other for a long time, and your school is lucky to have you. And it is really a privilege to speak to everyone here today. Let me start sharing my slides. Okay, great. Can you see my slides okay? I'll assume so. I'm going to talk today about artificial intelligence and its impact on a spectrum of clinical medicine and medical education. And you can't escape the fact that this has been a dramatic and wonderfully disruptive year on healthcare in particular, through the introduction and development of new AI technologies and tools. Here is the disclosure from your CME office, talking about the fact that I have no relevant financial disclosures or relationships. My own personal disclosures are that I am an employee, as was mentioned here at NYU School of Medicine and NYU Langone Health, and also, as was mentioned, I'm a board member of the AAMC and have funding from the AMA and am a biostatistics textbook author. The objectives really are to talk about some of the fundamentals of how AI is transforming medical education, and starting out really though on the clinical side, and how AI is very quickly altering and changing the landscape of what's possible in the world of clinical medicine. And though much of what we're talking about over the past year is generative AI, think tools like ChatGPT, which I'll explain in a second, AI is by no means new to healthcare. And there have been decades of of AI invention and innovation within healthcare. And in fact, there is a branch of the FDA, the Federal Drug Administration, that actually FDA approves AI algorithms. And believe it or not, there are over now 700 FDA approved diagnostic and therapeutic algorithms that are out there in the world, some of which are purchasable and routine parts of systems. As you see from the pie chart on the right, most of these are in the realm of radiology. And that is now sort of standard of care, standard of practice, that radiology systems will have AI augmented co-pilot systems that will read images along with practicing radiologists. But the diversity of these is growing, particularly in cardiovascular, where it's helping with rhythm interpretation, with ultrasound interpretation, in ophtho, looking at retinal images, a whole explosion of AI innovation. But what's different over the past year, and what's truly accelerating this disruptive change across clinical medicine and medical education, is this new type of AI called generative AI. And generative AI fundamentally works because human language is predictable. It is not random. It has rules and patterns. And if you see enough examples of it, you can mimic it. Generative AI is a set of algorithms that can create new content, new text. But now, more recently, these systems can create new images from nothing. They can create videos or music that are all incredibly realistic and lifelike. And these are all systems that are designed from seeing billions and billions of examples of something and then mimicking different variations of it. So these are trained on vast quantities of data. And we'll talk about this, that the data that are used to train the AI systems are both its power, but also its potential limitations. The better the data, the better the AI, the more flawed the data, the more flawed the subsequent AI. ChatGPT, which is one of these products, and GPT-4 are systems that have really become quite popular, with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of users across the world using these tools to do interesting and new things. And how do these generative AI systems work? Well, you start with billions and billions of text samples from documents, from websites. This is perfect for healthcare. We have billions and billions of text samples. We take that text and we break it up into individual components that the algorithms can read, called tokens. And then we feed all of those tokens, those words, those sentences, pages, and paragraphs into a cluster of supercomputers. And those systems simply read all of that text and figure out, for a given sentence or word, what's most likely to happen next. What's the word that's most likely to happen next or come next in that sentence? And fundamentally, that's how these systems work. They work by predicting one word or one token at a time and build a sentence, each word as it goes. And if you've ever used ChatGPT, and it moves very quickly, but if you look carefully, that's exactly what it's doing. It's building out its response one word at a time. So when it's given a new prompt like this, the best thing about AI is its ability to, it then has a series of words that might come next and their associated probabilities, and it chooses from among those to build out text that seems very lifelike and realistic. And unlike many things in healthcare where they're released to researchers or they're piloted, these systems have been released to the public in a very sort of fun and experimental way, and they really have caught fire. People are using AI systems to do everything. Like, this is from a New York Times article from last year, which is forever ago in AI, but planning workouts, writing wedding speeches. People are using them to write letters of recommendation, to write computer code in languages that they don't know how to program in, to translate things into different languages or different reading levels. And lots of funny quotes here on the right from that New York Times article. One of the best quotes I've heard about using these generative AI systems is that it's like collaborating with simultaneously the smartest and dumbest person you've ever worked with, because of the quirky way that these systems somehow work. Now, I mentioned that, and I'm going to focus on text, but I mentioned that these systems not only can generate text, but they can also generate and understand images as well. And so here are 3 examples that I created using 3 freely available tools. DAL-E on the left, DAL-E 2. This is from about a year ago. In the middle is a different company from about 6 months ago. And on the right is the most recent version of DAL-E, which is an image generation tool. And I asked each of these three systems, show me a picture of our medical students here at NYU learning together. And everything you see in these pictures is completely fake. These are not real people. It didn't cut and paste from different things. It's all completely synthetic. And if you look carefully, I don't know how well the slides come through on the Zoom, but on the left, the hands aren't quite right. The stethoscope is messed up. The watches are messed up. And if you look on the right, it looks really fantastic. The new version of these systems, able to generate incredibly realistic and high quality images. So though we're not going to talk about this part very much, you could immediately think about a million applications in medical education and patient care for generating unique images. Now, these systems don't just generate text and images, but they also understand text and images. And so in this experiment, I used Google Bard, which Google just renamed Gemini. There's a lot of name changes and fancy startup stuff that's happening with AI. But in this one, I took this picture on the right, I uploaded it to Google Bard, and any of you could do this. This is another freely available tool from Google. And I asked it, in this picture, what medications are in the image and what are they used for? And it was able to read all of the labels, understand all of the packaging. And you can see some of these things are stuck on labels. Some of these are packages. Some of these things are on their side. Some of these are bags. And it was able to give me a list of all of the things that were present in this code card tray. And not just what they were, but conceptually what they are used for, what class of substance or medication they are, and how they are potentially used. So this type of technology is potentially remarkable, both, as I said, in clinical care, but also really in medical education, a million applications for a system that can both understand what it's seeing and understand the meaning of what it is seeing. And we are adopting this in healthcare and being careful and intentional, as I'll talk about. But our patients are rapidly adopting these tools, oftentimes to try to get around a slower healthcare system. This is from a tweet, so I'm not violating Twitter. The link to the tweet is at the bottom there, where this person showed their results. This person's wife was prescribed this prescription, and this is the picture from their tweet. And he uploaded this picture to ChatGPT-4 and said, tell me about the potential side effects of this antibacterial that my wife was prescribed for an infected finger. And ChatGPT-4 responded with, first of all, knew what the med was, knew the dosing, and confirmed that what the person said was correct, and then listed common side effects of this particular medicine. Whether these are correct and relevant and accurate for that particular patient, that's something for us to discuss and something that needs to be elucidated further. But regardless, here's the patient using these tools to instantaneously get this higher order information and support based on nothing more than a cell phone picture, which is really quite remarkable. So I want to talk briefly about three areas where AI, in this generative AI, is posing a unique challenge for us, because it is doing quite well at serving the functions that we view as human excellence when it comes to the realm of being a physician. And these will have big implications, not only for us in delivering our care and potentially significantly changing the way we deliver care for the better. I'm an optimist, I think for the better, but these will have big implications for how we teach our current students and train our current house staff. So the first area is AI as a diagnostician. Can AI correctly diagnose patients when presented with their information? And there have been a bunch of studies about this. These studies have largely taken cases that have been well packaged. So these are cases from student exams, like this example, or CPCs, or challenging cases from the New England Journal. So we'll talk about what the implication of that might be. But in this first study, which was from 2023, last year, They took 14 clinical cases from Stanford's medical school. And these are progress testing cases that they give to first and second year medical students that are a clinical reasoning exam. It's a clinical vignette, probably very similar to the ones you use with your students. And the student has to answer with free text responses to the case. The faculty have a rubric to grade the student responses. And so they took a bunch of Stanford medical student responses to the questions. They ran them through ChatGPT, asked ChatGPT the same questions, and the faculty used the same rubric to grade ChatGPT as they did the Stanford students. And as you'll hear is a recurring theme in these studies, ChatGPT outperformed the Stanford students. And on average, it did better than the Stanford students at coming up with a differential diagnosis and reasoning through the case. And when it comes to things where completeness is important, like creating a full problem list, that's where these AI systems, which are designed to generate more text, tend to really outperform us. And here, ChatGPT created a problem list significantly better than the Stanford medical students. In this study, they looked at how ChatGPT did at correctly diagnosing New England Journal of Medicine case challenges, which are essentially CPC cases that are published and available in the New England Journal, and compared those to how the people who contributed to the diagnosis online, the physician readers of New England Journal of Medicine, did. And here too, the ChatGPT-4 outperformed the human faculty, getting 22 out of 38 correct versus 14 out of 38 correct for humans. And these are challenging cases in the New England Journal that are intentionally chosen to be difficult or nebulous or confusing. And here too, it did, as they quoted in the article, it did surprisingly well in solving these complex case challenges, and even better than the New England Journal of Medicine readers. When you add in the ability of these AI systems to now understand images, the gap widens, and the AI systems can do even better than us. This is a more recent study from Harvard, where they looked at New England Journal of Medicine challenge cases that had images as part of the case, a clinical image. And here they used the latest version of ChatGPT-4, which can understand the text and understand what it's seeing in the image. And an example from their paper on the right shows the picture that was fed into ChatGPT and what it interpreted it as, which is remarkable, that ChatGPT saw this picture and said, this is a rash that fluoresces coral red under ultraviolet light, which is characteristic of particular organism and a particular sign and symptom. And here, with the image augmentation, ChatGPT-4 had an accuracy of 61% on these cases versus 49% for humans. It tends to not be as good at radiographic images this week, at least. We'll see how it does next week. But when it comes to other types of gross specimen or other pathology images, it really does quite amazingly well. And others have done similar studies on non-ChatGPT systems. This is a study from Google, so take this with a grain of salt, because they are trying to sell their version of medical large language models and GPT type systems to us, while at the same time as they're the ones running many of these studies. They have their own large language model called PalmMed, which is designed specifically for healthcare, unlike ChatGPT. So all of those studies I just showed you where ChatGPT did really well at diagnosing the patients, that is not a system that was trained on electronic health record notes. It was trained on Wikipedia and other information on the internet. Here, this is a system that was designed specifically for medicine and biomedicine and biomedical diagnoses. In this case, they had 302 cases sourced from the New England Journal of Medicine, similar to the other studies. And they had 4 scenarios that Google ran through for these cases. The first was just to have the AI do the case by itself and come up with a differential diagnosis. The second scenario was to have a human faculty member use the AI to come up with the diagnosis. The third scenario was to have a human faculty member use Google or UpToDate, not use AI, but use digital resources to come up with a differential. And then the fourth scenario was just humans with our brains, no help from digital resources. And you can see the depressing chart on the right. The red line at the top is the AI by itself. It outperformed all of the other modalities. And in fact, when you add in humans, the more human only the modality, the worse the results in terms of differential diagnosis accuracy. And even in partnership with the human, the AI does worse than when it works by itself. A lot to unpack here, and there's a lot to really dig into with this particular study. And I have the link to the preprint on the lower right. But this is fascinating that these systems have this level of performance, granted on very well packaged cases. These aren't electronic health record cases where half the history is in a PDF that was uploaded from another hospital, and you have to talk to the patient's cousin to find out this key part of information. These are cases that really carefully and cleanly package the history, the review of systems, the labs, the physical exam findings, et cetera. Google did another study, though, that begins to go beyond that concept of these well-packaged cases. Google developed a system called Amy, which is this medical intelligence explorer. And unlike an AI where you basically drop in the case as text and it computes and thinks and then gives you the result, this system interactively talks to the patient and gathers history in a dynamic way, asks the patient questions to come to a conclusion. So as you converse with the AI through a text chat, the AI is asking you follow-up questions based on its differential, confirming or eliminating things that might be on its list. And you can see some examples on the right where the AI is having this conversation with, in this case, a standardized patient. Google did a study where they took 149 OSCE scenarios, fake patient scenarios, and had standardized patients on the other side of the chat. The standardized patient did not know if they were talking to either the AI or one of 20 faculty member physicians. And they went through this text-based chat conversation and then looked at the outcomes. And here the outcomes are the AI outcomes are in salmon. The human faculty outcomes are sort of in that purple color. On the left are the objective measures of the case. Did they get the right diagnosis? Did they come up with a management plan? And did they correctly escalate the case in terms of severity or need for follow-up or urgency? And you'll see that when it came to diagnostic accuracy and even management plan, the AI outperformed the human faculty. They tied on escalation recommendation, which is remarkable because that showed here that the AI had some judgment with respect to the severity and urgency. And on the right is the evaluation from the standardized patient. Did they feel confident in the care? Did they feel, and remember this is through a text chat, did they feel that there was empathy and openness and honesty from the quote unquote doctor on the other side of the text chat, some of which were AI and some of which were humans? And here the AI surprisingly outperformed the faculty, who admittedly probably are not used to doing that type of patient interaction through a text chat. But regardless, this is really quite remarkable because it's showing even at this relatively early stage of AI, these systems are profoundly good at diagnosing, at coming up with a management plan, and creating a differential diagnosis. The second area in the clinical realm that I wanted to talk about was AI as a patient communicator, which has been both a wonderful evolution in healthcare, particularly after the 21st Century Cures Act was passed, that patients now have much, much more access to the data, their data of healthcare, and much, much more access through the patient portal to their physicians and the healthcare team. As wonderful as that is, this is something that's a challenge for physicians in the healthcare team, many of whom can get 200 messages a day from the electronic health record. And we know that particularly patients with chronic illnesses and disease do not get particularly as many touch points or outreach points as we would like from the healthcare side. So can AI actually talk to some of these patients and be some of the communication that takes place between doctors and patients? And so a couple early studies and early work on this, where this was a study just looking at can AI respond to patient questions in a similar way? This is a sort of an entertaining study. It was a very interesting study. They actually used the website Reddit, for those of you who are familiar with it. And in that, there is a discussion board area, a subreddit, that is for patients to ask questions of verified doctors. So the doctors are real and they have to prove their credentials to answer questions, but there's no therapeutic relationship between the doctors and the patient, and the conversation is anonymous. They took a bunch of questions that patients asked of doctors on that forum, the text of the doctor's response, and then, like the studies I showed you, they had ChatGPT answer those same questions, and then had a bunch of healthcare providers in a blinded fashion review the responses to patient questions, not knowing if they were written by human faculty or human physicians or the AI, and then rate them in terms of the quality of answering the question, as well as the empathy of that. And here, the AI really outperformed the human doctors. Again, this is an anonymous forum where doctors are probably not going to write in the same way they would if they were writing directly to a patient that they knew and cared for. But regardless, the AI got good or very good ratings for the quality of its response, 4 times as many times as the physician posts. And 5% of the doctor's posts were graded as empathic or very empathic, compared to almost 50% of the ChatGPT posts. The LA Times actually wrote this long political cartoon about this paper and the provocative aspect of the AI being more empathic than the doctor. And, a sneaking suspicion, I think, against us as physicians around this. And I love this panel on the left where it shows the physician's response, "You'll be fine," and ChatGPT, "Oh, I'm so sorry you're feeling this way. It can be upsetting, blah, 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 blah." A great example they gave in this study was that one of the questions was, "Hey, I'm going on vacation to Costa Rica. Do I need to take malaria prophylaxis?" And the physician wrote, "Go to the CDC website, find the map, look where your resort is, and it'll tell you if you need to take the pills or not." The AI said, "Go to the CDC website, find where your resort is on the map, and you'll know whether you need to take the pills or not. Costa Rica is beautiful this time of year. We hope you have a wonderful trip." And you can see how the patient would immediately find that empathic. Now, there are a host of startups that are emerging around this concept of scalable AI-driven patient outreach. On the left is a mental health app called Wobot. It was actually just profiled on Sunday and in 60 Minutes talking about this, because it's a really amazing idea, where patients with mild mental health disorders of various types can sign up, and they can have a daily conversation with the AI, where the AI is asking them structured questions, collecting symptom data, and measuring response to therapy, response to medications, et cetera. The AI can detect if something is amiss and immediately break the glass and escalate and bring a human being into the conversation, especially when it comes to potentially very acute mental health crises. But this is something where this could help 1,000 patients a day or 100,000 patients a day. On the right is Hello Heart, another startup that is around cardiovascular disease management. And this can also follow along and say, "Hey, you started your medication. How are you doing? What's your blood pressure look like? We're going to synthesize this information and give it back to your care team," et cetera. You could imagine so many opportunities where this would be so helpful and complementary, and hopefully not completely cannibalistic of the way that healthcare teams are, and meet some of the largely unmet need in the outpatient setting that these things could really adapt to. As I mentioned, in basket messages, I don't know, but you likely use Epic as well. But I'm sure whatever EHR you use, you get in basket messages from patients. And Epic is actually adding ChatGPT to Epic. We're piloting this feature here at NYU, where Epic will draft the response back to the patient based on the content of their chart and what the patient wrote in that. The physician has to review it, and they can choose to delete it and write their own message. They could choose to edit what the AI came up with, or they could choose to send what the AI sent. The AI does not respond directly to the patient. You still have to go in and manage your draft. The piloting has been going on here. Our faculty feedback so far has been that just like the examples I showed before, it tends to be overly friendly and write longer messages than they historically have done. Sometimes it's inconsistent in its tone and the topic or content that's being discussed. And sometimes it does funky things, like include things that really aren't relevant for that particular message at all. But this could potentially truly help our faculty who are dealing with such a huge amount of that, and really help bridge in a way that's not burdensome our patients and the whole care team. The last area on the clinical side, and potentially the one that would help us the most directly, is can the AI do some of the work of clinical documentation? Can it be a scribe that is sitting next to you? So a couple early studies in this, and as far as I know, no one is doing this in real life as of yet, officially, because of the concern of errors in the AI system making its way into the electronic health record. But in some of these early studies, this one looked at the ability of the AI to use daily progress notes to write the discharge summary. They took a bunch of encounters on an inpatient neurology service, the actual discharge summaries that were generated, and then using those progress notes from those same encounters generated AI discharge summaries and compared the two. And you can see the results on the box plots on the right. The dark box plots are the AI ones. The light box plots are the physician-written discharge summaries. And here the physicians outperformed the AI, but lots of overlap in those confidence intervals. And for a first pass, the AI did pretty well. It produced, surprisingly to me, it produced shorter discharge summaries than the faculty, but it made some mistakes, big mistakes. It was challenged with false negatives, and they omitted some important events. These are the last thing you want in a discharge summary, is to not have all of the critical facts. They felt, despite this, that it was something they could really iterate into a relatively quick way into a very useful product. And they really felt that for a first draft, this was quite strong. I foresee a future where there is no more discharge summary, that no one will ever have to write one again, and that anytime you want to look at a summary of a clinical interval, the system will dynamically generate it at that time, assuming we achieve sufficient accuracy, reliability, and a system that is equitable and ethical, which we'll talk about. This is a study from here at NYU, where they were looking at how to use human authored discharge summaries and use the AI not to replace or write those discharge summaries, but can the AI take the discharge summary and turn that into a patient readable format to give as a summary of the encounter and a summary of their stay in the hospital to the patient. The faculty here, this was done by our medicine hospitalist program. They created prompts and they used the AI to transform these discharge summaries, and then evaluated the subsequent patient-friendly format on two clever measures: a readability measure, this is like grade level readability, and a patient health understandability using this patient education materials assessment tool. And what I really love about this paper, and I'm biased obviously since it's from my own institution, was that, as I'll show you in this next slide, they showed us where the AI really got it wrong. 54% though of the translated versions of the discharge summaries had perfect scores for readability and understandability. So in just a little bit more than half the case, it did a great job at taking a technical discharge summary and making a patient-friendly version that could be given to the patient. But 18 of them had safety concerns, mostly involving omissions where it didn't include something, but several had hallucinations. And I'll talk more in a couple slides about what hallucinations are. It's a bad word because these aren't hallucinations, it's confabulations, where the AI is making stuff up or adding in additional information that was not present in the document it was asked to summarize. And so here in this table, it actually shows examples of some of the things where the AI got it wrong. And so if you look at the second row, hallucination, some of the abbreviations were incorrect and some numbers were incorrect for laboratory work. So the AI actually changed some of these lab values, which is a big problem. In the third row there, the patient-friendly discharge summary said that the patient had an infection, but there was no infection that was documented as a part of the visit. The fifth one or sixth one down there, did not mention nausea and vomiting as as the reason the patient came to the hospital, which was their primary reason. And it did not mention things like this, where it can make mistakes or confabulations or hallucinations in a way that could lead to actual medical errors or misinterpretations. This was a recent study from Nature that looked at the ability of AI models, and this was a cool study because unlike the ones I've shown, most of which were just GPT-4, in this study they looked at a mix of large language models, including open source ones that are freely available for all of our health systems to run internally. And here they looked at, they basically took a bunch of different AI models and gave them a bunch of different tasks. Understand a radiology report, respond to a patient question, summarize a progress note, answer a doctor-patient or interpret a doctor-patient dialogue and summarize that. And they looked at, across different axes, how complete and correct and concise the different systems were. And if you look at these graphs, when it comes to completeness, the AI seems to have done better. But when you look at correctness and conciseness, the neither is the strongest signal. And this is very encouraging, meaning that it could have gone either way. And maybe the AI is very close to doing a lot of this grunt work, if you will, of the free text tasks of medicine that so frequently fall to the physician. And in this paper as well, this is from Nature, they give very detailed information of where the system got it right and got it wrong. And so in this case, they're looking at a progress note. And if you look at the summary on the top right by the medical expert, that's what a faculty member reading this note is, their sort of shorthand summary of the key issues in the note. Those terms that are in purple, the AI agreed with. Those terms that are in blue, the AI were close to. And in the bottom, the summary of the best model, the summary by the AI model, you can see in red things that it made up that were not present in the progress note at all. The progress note says the patient has diabetes. The AI said it's type 1 diabetes, even though the particular type wasn't there at all. So lots of work there. And Epic is introducing a tool to do a dynamic summary of the patient's stay or last few days that are there in the system to support doctors. Importantly, this tool is not meant to create a note that you then drop in as the discharge summary. This is merely meant to be a helpful tool. Let's say you're a consultant and you're being called in on a patient who's been in the ICU for 2 weeks. This will give you a quick overview of the things that have been written about over the past 2 weeks while they were there, whereas you don't have to read through necessarily every single note to get all of those things. So I think these tools are really going to make a difference. Since they can understand the context of what our students, house staff, and faculty are writing, it opens up new avenues of decision support. This was our first clinical decision support tool that we created within Epic here using ChatGPT. We have a private HIPAA compliant version of ChatGPT, just to be very clear that we're using this in a safe space. And this actually reads the note that the physician is writing, reads the orders, and when something doesn't line up, like the physician says, today's day 2 of antibiotics, and there is no order for that, the AI will pop up an alert and say, there's a mismatch here. Can you please figure out what the problem is? Perhaps most excitingly in this area of the AI helping us with documentation, and this might be one of the things that's most disruptive to our current models of medical school and residency and how we teach interviewing and documentation, is ambient documentation, which is another thing that we're piloting here, and I'm sure you guys are piloting this in some way. Ambient documentation takes the text of the conversation, the audio of the conversation between a doctor and a patient and turns that into a draft note. You have an app on your phone that is secure within the confines of the hospital network. You put it on the table between you and the patient. You have a normal conversation where you're not having to type the whole time. It knows your voice. It knows who the patient is. It turns everything you're saying into text. And then the AI takes the content of that conversation and drafts the key sections of the note, like history of present illness, review of systems, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This could be a huge time saver. You sit and you have a normal conversation, you do your physical exam, you would have to speak aloud the physical exam results for this to work. Regardless, this will be figured out. And then when you sit down at the towards the end of the visit, this draft note is sitting there and waiting for you to edit it and revise it, as opposed to write it de novo. This could really change the ability for us to have rapport with our patients. This all sounds great, and it is moving very fast. There are some caveats for this part. As I said, these things make mistakes, big time mistakes, and at times hallucinations, and make up values and facts. The data I've shown you, the studies I've shown you, have largely been anecdotal and have been on these perfect cases that have been published in journals, not on real world per se. One of the challenges in informatics is that if you've used these systems, they sound very smart. They sound, the text that they create is very accurate sounding and confident, and we tend to trust it without questioning the truthfulness or accuracy of it. There's also some emerging evidence that AI models developed for healthcare are not necessarily generalizable across different healthcare systems, and we could talk about that at the end. And so this is all moving quickly, but it definitely is a first draft for now. Now, I definitely wanted to talk about, so what are the implications for medical education, and how are we using AI in our medical school for our medical students and residents here at NYU? Well, across the country, and I'm sure your students are exactly the same as ours, medical students began using AI from day one to help their medical education. If you talk to them, they're using it for PBL cases to generate differential diagnoses and plans. When you talk to them, they're not looking to cheat and get the answer. They're looking for the AI to help inform their clinical reasoning through the case. Medical students are clever. They're taking OSCE cases, putting them into ChatGPT, saying to ChatGPT, hey, here's the case. You're the patient. I'm going to be the doctor. I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions, answer from the case, and at the end, give me feedback. Did I actually gather the right information? Did I ask empathic questions? Did I take a full history, et cetera? Their ability to create as many different simulated cases as they want to practice with. Of course, they're using it for assessment items and flashcards. We really hope that if they are using it for things like clinical write-ups, that they're doing so in a very safe way, in a protected version of ChatGPT. But a million applications in medical education. And just like on the clinical side, there are a bunch of startups that are now happening in medical education, and AI is being added to every app there is, including the Med Ed app. These are two companies that I just have screenshots from their website. I don't know really anything about them or the quality of their products, but they're both virtual OSCE companies where it's almost limitless practice cases that students can go through, and you can alter the characteristics and the demographics of the patient. You can change the case based on the performance level of the individual student. Really, a lot of interesting possibilities that open up. There's also companies and groups that are developing AI tutors and virtual coaches that will help medical students and guide them through their learning as they go through medical school, giving them resources tailored to them, coming up with assessment items, grading, helping them with essays and all sorts of things. And I think that this will become a real complement to the way that we teach medical students and train house staff. Medical students are also organizing themselves. They've got websites and blog posts that share prompts for the AI to do all sorts of medical education tasks and generate content and quality. And the prompts that they've created are amazing and really fantastic. As I mentioned, we have our own private version of ChatGPT. And so we're integrating ChatGPT into many of our medical student locally developed applications that we use for our medical students. We have a specific app that we created to support our student coaching program, where faculty are paired with students and do longitudinal coaching. And in that system, throughout the 3 or 4 years of medical school, our students have to author goals, and they get help on those goals from their coach. But we added the ability for students to also ask ChatGPT for help on their goals. So in this case, this is altered goal and de-identified. But in this goal, which was based on a real one from a student, they wanted to expand their knowledge of physiatry, rehab medicine, and remain up to date. And they wanted to do the things we all want to do: read journal articles, read a textbook, become familiar with review resources. And they have this link now in the system where they could say, hey, ChatGPT, give me some recommendations on how to achieve this goal. And it's remarkable how good ChatGPT is at giving them advice. It's generic advice to them, but it is not generic advice to our medical school. ChatGPT has read all of our web pages, just as it has yours. It is able to recommend individual clinical facilities and clinics here at NYU to our medical students who want to learn about particular topics. It correctly suggested the right journals for this student. It figured out the textbook, really gives amazing supplementary advice. This is not a replacement for our human coaches, because this doesn't understand that particular student and what would work best for them. But when it comes to specialty specific recommendations, it can really be a powerful complement. We have another system that also uses ChatGPT as a summary tool. We have an AI tool that every night goes into our electronic health record, finds the new cases that our medical students have taken on, and extracts the diagnosis from that, and then creates a curated set of resources that are complementary to that diagnosis, sends the student an email in the morning. So if they admit a patient for acute pancreatitis in the afternoon, the next morning they'll get an email that looks like this. Hey, you just admitted a patient with acute pancreatitis. Here are some resources from AMBOSS and some self-study questions from Osmosis from UpToDate. And then we also now give them both review and guideline articles from a real-time PubMed search that the system does. So it's doing a up-to-date pull of some of these recent guideline articles. And we've added the ability for ChatGPT to pull those abstracts, summarize the common themes and the key points across them. So our students can get this really quick snapshot before rounds of ongoing research and key elements and key areas of focus for these particular clinical diagnoses. And then they can go back to those individual resources and deepen their learning however they see fit and works for them around particular clinical topics, all automatically generated by AI and tailored to what they're seeing. So we are really, we're really all in on the potential for AI transforming our health system, our research mission, and our medical school. And our vision is that the majority of all text written here, whether it is the ICU or the student cafeteria, that all of that text will, where appropriate, will one day pass through an equitable and ethical language model to improve the quality, efficiency, and safety of everyone here and all of the work that they're doing. We have a bunch of different research teams that are working on these AI solutions. I'm leading the one in education. There's one in research. There's several on the clinical side. And we are rapidly implementing these models across our workforce and across our work areas. We're studying this. We're being very intentional. There's many areas where there really isn't yet clinical approval or clinical guidance, and that needs to come before it gets fully deployed, but it's an area that we really want to invest in. And we've done a lot of work trying to get our whole community up to speed here, whether it's a first-year medical student or a senior faculty member or someone who works in housekeeping. We really want everybody to get on board. So we formed an AI advisory work group that's chaired by our CIO. As I mentioned, we partnered with Microsoft and we got a private version of ChatGPT, and that is fully HIPAA and PHI compliant, so we can work in that environment using real clinical data, research, or educational data. We've been doing a series of promptathons with everybody in our community, including medical students and residents, which are a lot of fun. They're just like hackathons, but it's about developing prompts to achieve certain things. And we have been training our own internal generative AI models on the clinical side, not on the education side, but believing that if we understand what data goes into them, we'll be able to better understand biases and accuracy in those systems. And most recently, we're just launching a new master's program in healthcare AI that is open to our medical students, residents, and faculty. And it's part of our biomedical informatics masters that we have here at the medical school. So just to quickly wrap up, you might be thinking, well, geez, those are all things I do as a doctor. You know, am I going to be replaced? Or when I give a talk like this to the medical students, they say, what am I doing here if the AI can do this? And there's a great quote here from the New England Journal: computing science will probably exert its major effects by augmenting and in some cases largely replacing the intellectual functions of the physician. And we can take solace in the fact that that was from 1970. And here we are with vastly improved technology, and yet have not seen the replacement of physicians or the replacement of our role in this. There's a lot of challenges to AI in medicine. Right now, it's not accurate and valid and reliable enough. So there needs to be human validation of everything, which really gates its ability to scale. There's a lack of transparency of how these systems work. And when we use these commercial models, we don't know how they were trained. There's privacy issues which need to be addressed. That's probably the easiest of the ones on this slide. And we all need to think differently about how we're teaching our students and residents, given that they're going to be in a world that works very differently. And as I mentioned, the evidence base needs to be much, much stronger. Everything I've presented has largely been unregulated, and there's now a real push, both in the House of Medicine, to come up with principles of regulation. The middle one, the National Academy of Medicine, just, I think yesterday, released their initial set of principles for a healthcare artificial intelligence code of conduct. The FDA has a regulatory arm that is looking at all of this and wants to have agility in approving all of it. But a lot to be done about both the appropriateness and etiquette of using AI, but also the regulatory review. All of that being said, I think this is a great place to have an AI transformation. Our ability to deliver healthcare does not meet the demand by our patients and communities. So even if AI can just expand our existing workforce virtually, maybe we can make a dent in that for the better. And we're lucky because patients want care that is both the latest science and cutting edge, but delivered by a human whose hand they can hold. They don't want a transactional thing like they're looking for from banking. So they're looking for us to partner with AI to be better. And so to that end, I think that AI is going to be a new member of the healthcare team, partly scribe, partly sitting over our shoulder, helping us make some diagnoses and do clinical decision making. And it will certainly help us tackle the data overload, the communication overload, the documentation overload, and ultimately free us up for more patient interaction and higher order activities. One of the hardest parts of all this is staying up to date. So I have a bunch of links here of people you could follow on Twitter. I also have a document at this QR code or this link, a Google Doc, where I have a ton of different resources that you can use to learn more about this. Some great places on how to write good prompts, some resources, and lots of the things that I mentioned throughout the talk. And I can put this link in the chat. But I will stop there. Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk, and I'd be happy to take questions.
Thank you very much. Well, that was absolutely amazing, as I expected. So what I would like to do is open up this to questions. Are there any questions? There was a question in chat, and I'm pulling it up now. It's from Dr. Manjalori. He writes, regarding comparing LLMs to doctor med students in diagnosis, I'm concerned about such a comparison given that we have challenges in comparing the performance of one physician to another. Seems to me that we would benefit from data transparency in understanding how the LLMs come to their conclusions. Do you agree? And if so, how do we advocate for this happening?
I completely agree. And the lack of transparency, how did the AI come to its conclusion, is a huge weakness here. ChatGPT will not tell us anything about how they trained it. Is it getting its medical information from Harrison's textbook of medicine, or is it getting it from Donald Trump's tweets? And they will not release that information because it's a trade secret. On the other hand, there are many open source models, and many medical health systems and medical schools are beginning to develop their own models where they release exactly what went into the model and how the different model weights are used in creating the actual output of the large language model. So I think for healthcare, we definitely need to get away from this black box phenomenon to an explainable system. And there's a lot of work that really needs to be done to get there. And I think that's going to be coming more from the House of Medicine and from medical centers than we're going to see from companies like Google and OpenAI, who have a commercial interest in keeping some intellectual property hidden. That being said, when you talk about what the Biden administration and others are doing, one of the first things they often talk about is mandating that transparency. So we'll see how this plays out, but I think we're going to see an improvement there.
Thank you. A question from Dr. Letsu. Are your NYU students using standard textbooks, or is it mostly web-based materials?
Yeah, I suspect you'd probably get a slightly different answer if you ask the students themselves versus the faculty. And I'm sure that's a universal phenomenon at schools. In reality, the students are using mostly web-based materials, whether or not we're asking them to use textbooks. And I think that actually lends itself very well to the potential of AI recommended content and the modularity of this. And I should say that for all of the medical education vendors, whether it's the exam systems or knowledge providers like Amboss or Osmosis or Scholar RX, they're all adding AI features to their system. So our students will benefit from these things. But I think that AI is, just like it has disrupted many things, it's definitely going to disrupt the traditional academic publishing model and textbooks, and the ability for students to, let's say, take a textbook and remix it into something that is personalized and customized for them by the AI. I mean, imagine if, and you can do this experiment now, at the end of a lecture, the AI could take the transcript of the lecture that the room recording system or Zoom generates, drop that into the AI and say, for my 150 medical students, please generate 150 different sets of 10 self-assessment questions each. And it could easily do that. And so there's a huge precision medical education opportunity in this.
Well, thank you very much. Time is now up. Thank you very much, Dr. Triola.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity and great to meet everyone.